Great introduction and great connection there to kind of where E2Open got started, and a great example of how AI was used within supply chain, because what Daniel's describing is what we call demand sensing. So calculating that near-term forecast and making sure that untouched, highly accurate forecasting is in use in supply chain. And it's been going, for I think 16, 17 years. All right, well, thanks everyone for coming out today. I have probably about 25 minutes of presentation. They asked me to come out here and present about sort of my background, sort of what E2Open is doing in terms of AI within supply chain. The first part of my presentation is a little bit about what not to do, right? So a little bit of a kind of executive mindset of how you should be thinking about this as you leave the conference. I'm sure you've been hearing a lot about, hey, AI technology, it's kind of everywhere nowadays. There shouldn't really be a adopt AI strategy. There should be a solve your business problem strategy. And that's sort of the crux for the first part of my presentation. So if you don't know or aren't familiar with E2Open, E2Open is a broad, really supply chain operating platform. It goes kind of across all different departments, across all different industries, does everything from sort of helping you manage your channel and distribution networks to planning, demand sensing is an example of that, all the way across your logistics network. So very big in the logistics space. Blue Jay is the company that we acquired that kind of heads up the logistics side of the house. We also connect to suppliers through collaboration, forecast, inventory, manufacturing collaboration. So we really have taken a supply chain centric approach, which sort of differentiates us from some of the other vendors that you'll see in this space. So very focused on the technology arm of supply chain. So I've been with the company for about 4 years. I've been in supply chain for about 20, 25 years. The first 10 years, I had a very, different jobs in large organizations. And then about 10, 12 years ago, I switched to a consulting role with really a systems focus. So doing both implementation and then later solutions consulting. So I've seen sort of the good of how emerging technology is being used in organizations, and also places where we missed a few steps and it hasn't gone well. So I want to kind of bring all of my learnings together today and kind of give you some information about how you should be approaching this new wave of technology that's coming out. First off, at the bottom of the slide here, you see, okay, don't just use AI for AI's sake. I think a lot of people have come out to the conference with a learning mindset, which is good. Okay, what are people doing in supply chain now around AI? It really should be more of an internal question first of, okay, what problems do we have today? And then go to the solution then, and then to value beyond that. Again, a lot of discussions that we have around, okay, what are you doing in supply chain? And it's sort of a generic answer without having a problem statement to grab onto. And just, again, to educate on the technology arm of today's discussion. So AI is everywhere, right? But everything is not AI. So we sort of break down the categories this way. So the new thing that's out, right, is generative AI. So this is LLMs, deep learning models. This is what people are using today to analyze vast amounts of data, do a lot of great things. I'm not going to go too far into exactly what it is. I did use it to then generate an image, which is right here. I don't know if you can tell. It's an AI-generated headshot in this picture. I kind of did it as a joke for like the AI presentation. My boss rejected the expense report, so joke's on me, I guess. There's also traditional AI. So this is what Daniel was referring to. E2Open's been around, again, in supply chain for a number of years. So we kind of break down traditional AI into 3 main categories. And this is what we do for near-term demand sensing. So supervised AI is very good at finding patterns in data. It's basically used for prediction algorithms. There's then unsupervised AI, which is without any human intervention at all, kind of generating that, and also doing things like making correlations between seemingly unrelated pieces of data. So this is the story we usually tell here is the ice cream and cigarette story, where the demand patterns follow each other, but you would never realize this if you weren't scouring vast amounts of data in an unsupervised way to go and then make that correlation on how those two things go together. And then reinforcement AI is really like a trial and error approach. Okay, is this input a predictor for demand? Let's run that, figure out, does that work, yes or no? These three things really make up what we're doing today within AI, within supply chain. And there's other aspects which are very important, but not necessarily AI. So we have things like planning heuristics and planning optimization, which are algorithm-based, very important cornerstones of supply chain technology, but not necessarily AI. But again, the key thing here, as a supply chain leader, you don't need to know necessarily the nuances of what is AI and what's not AI. It's really the technology-focused approach is kind of wrought with problems. So start with a problem-first approach and then get the solution from there. So first internal, then technology. So for the agenda today, I kind of broke this down into 4 main sections. So data is the first piece. So we'll go data, organizational mindset, and I'll give you some specifics on what we're doing with the kind of newer version of AI that's out. So as you go back, to work tomorrow and Friday, and you get to the point where you're talking to your teams, understand, okay, what are the problems that you're having today? Really think about this in terms of most supply chain problems don't happen within your organization, they happen in the supply chain. So in order to address these problems and apply AI technology in the supply chain, you really need to think about the data that you're going to use to fuel the AI. So think ecosystem data versus enterprise data. That's a very important sort of cornerstone approach that we've taken in building out our supply chain-centric set of applications and platform. So the data availability may not be as high, but this is something that you can start working on now to help fuel future AI technology deployment. The good news here is that companies like E2Open have kind of made this problem much more accessible, where 50 years ago it was if you were vertically integrated, you could do it. Otherwise, you were just 2 organizations working separately and having a handshake agreement through a purchase order. Today, the type of collaboration between enterprises is much higher than it's ever been, both in ways supply chains operate today and also the technology sector that's available. Again, data being sort of like the fuel for AI, you have to think about quality and quantity. AI will only be as good as the data that's presented to it, so you need a data strategy to accompany the AI strategy. So these 2 things will obviously work together. And then, think about, okay, the long term, what are the harder problems to solve and what data is needed for that? Because very likely you'll have to start gathering that data sooner, because if you go to implement and the first step is get data and it takes 6 months or a year to align that and have the data in place, the connections built, all those things, it might be too late. So data should be the front of your mind as you start to approach technology deployments going forward. All right, data is an easy one. I'm not going to go too far on that, but just remind you to think about that as you move forward. The next is organizational mindset. So the way that this AI technology works is a lot different than what's been around in the past. And you have to think about how well your organization will do in adopting this technology. So around 2015 is when Ford switched the F-150 from steel to aluminum. That had all kinds of ramifications on the metal supply chains. So at the time I was implementing, this is probably 2014, a global supply chain optimization software at large aluminum manufacturer. We did it kind of region by region. First we did North America, then we did South America, then we did Asia. And the last stop, this is probably April timeframe of 2014, was Switzerland. So this is the European branch of this large aluminum company. And we're going through, so okay, this is the 4th region. Everything's already kind of been set up. All the things are in place. This will be pretty smooth. About a month into the implementation, Patrick gets added to the team. Patrick is asking a lot of very challenging questions. Really kind of every meeting he's speaking up. We're sort of like, okay. One day I sit down to lunch with Patrick and I'm just, hey, tell me about your background, kind of where you come from, all these different things. It turns out he had been working with very similar software in a different department for a couple of years. And his response was, I don't like it. So, okay. He said, it works well enough. The problem I have is I can never explain the results. I can never explain to people what's going on. So if someone says, hey, why was this order pushed out? All he could say was the computer said so. sales calls and says, hey, how come we're not delivering to this customer? The computer said so. So Patrick's perception was, I'm not doing my job as well as I could be because I can't explain these results to my peers and my colleagues. And it was a sticking point for him, right? So why do you all care about Patrick's story from 10 years ago? That same sort of transparency mindset has to exist within your organization as you move forward with deploying technology. So end users need to be able to explain the results of AI technology and being able to really accelerate adoption. That is one of the key things. What this means is training, working with the right partners, having the right policies in place to support AI deployment and those types of things. So think about Patrick as you move forward, and it's not just, hey, put some technology in place, because a lot of the things that are coming out now are big step forward in how people are going to operate in the future. Now, this is probably not the first time you've seen a slide like this week, but the point that I want to stress is that, again, the technology-first approach is going to be problematic. What's also very important as the technology gets more sophisticated is that the people and processes surrounding it are very well understood and very well mapped out, and you have the right type of mindset for adopting this technology. So, again, problem, solution, value is sort of the way that you should be thinking about this. And then as you're sort of doing all this, bringing all this together, tying that kind of value delivery to where you're going as a company, what your company goals are, is going to be very important to facilitate that, okay, how people are working today versus what's better now than it was versus where are we going as a company, and having all that aligned is sort of a key role for supply chain leadership. Okay, now what we're doing within technology now is the key new thing is agentic AI. So what this means is we sort of have this goal to automate the vast majority of supply chain tasks that are done today. Now, this is an ambitious goal. We've put some percentage numbers out there, but no one really knows. Somebody in marketing said 80%. I said, let's wait and see on that 80% number. But it's coming, and really what this means is that the supply chain functions or the supply chain jobs in the future, say 5, 10 years from now, will look a lot different than they do today. Because as this technology goes in place and we automate more and more tasks, the simple things that supply chain people do, okay, moving data around between spreadsheets, sending emails, collecting information back, all of those steps are going to be automated. And really what supply chain is a set of nuances that require complex decision-making and human reasoning. In the future, supply chain people are going to focus more on that part of the job and less on that 60% of just moving things around, figuring stuff out before I can actually do value-add work. So the way that we are doing this and striving for this supply chain job of the future is with agentic AI. So we break this down into 3 main categories. So we have the data query and analysis first. So this is basically, okay, let me communicate with the system about the data and the decisions that are being made so I can be able to explain the results, right? So if we had this for Patrick, he could say, okay, why was this order pushed out? Let me ask the system, let me get a transparent response back that I can go and communicate back to people. So asking questions about the data, about the decisions that are being made, all these type of things are what number 1 indicates. Number 2, the functional agents, is really where the automation piece comes in. So essentially what people will be able to do in the future is, okay, I have this task that I do each day. It seems like not that challenging, it just takes a lot of time. I want to be able to have an agent functioning within the platform that's going to do that task for me. So I want to say, okay, use these inputs, here's the instruction on what you should do with it, and here's what the output should look like. I can test this, set this up, and have this run, either based on a prompt or on a trigger, and then automate all the simple things that I'm doing today. And the next thing is knowledge query. So this is more about how the application works itself. So you'd be surprised within supply chain technology how it's fairly complex technology and it's a fairly small user base. So the information around how the applications work as you get to the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th generation user can be challenging. So being able to ask the application themselves how it's supposed to work, what the business process should be, is all part of what knowledge query agents are. Now, again, as the supply chain leaders, as you're moving forward, it's really important to have a strategy around this technology. So I kind of touched on this earlier, but you can use sort of any process you want. This is my reminder to have a process in place on how you're doing this. So I'm a big proponent of step one needs to be identify the challenges and the problems that your organization has. So really starting with a problem statement will go a long way versus starting with we should be adopting AI. I think what happens a lot as companies hear about peers or competitors that are adopting things, they get worried that, hey, we're falling behind because we're not doing it. Let's start doing some AI stuff. And again, it's not going to be successful if you do it that way. First start with, hey, we have a problem, we have to fix this problem. Step two, this is probably what you've started this week, is gaining awareness around what technology is doing today. Because again, it's developing fast. So bringing in system providers, consultants, going to events like this is a great way to kind of do your homework around step two, understanding what is possible, what is out there. It's a very important part of it. And then step three is going to be, okay, organizationally align that this is our strategy. And I think it's more important with this sort of automation around AI to have a kind of cross-department, cross-functional approach to this. So really start from the top and bring everyone together and say, okay, here's how we want to operate in the future. What do we have to do to get there? Making sure that everyone cross-function is aligned on what the roadmap and strategy is. And then finally, step four would be, okay, when we go to implement and turn this technology on, think about the balance between time to value and benefit, and think about quick wins. Okay, what can we get stood up quickly? I've seen firsthand over the last 10 years how important it is to have a win under your belt, have the organization get something positive out of an implementation that doesn't take forever, and you can really use that momentum to grow, get buy-in, increase user adoption, et cetera, as sort of, the organization mindset shifts. Okay, now, how are we doing this, right? So over the last really 2 years, we've been spending the majority of R&D dollars on what we're doing with AI within the platform. Before we started just building stuff, we thought about, okay, what do we want to do? We want to automate a lot of the actions that happen today. How do we do this with these functional agents? How should these functional agents think? So we put together these 3 principles. So number one is the data availability principle. So the quality of agentic decisions is only as good as the relevance, accuracy, and completeness of data available to the agent. So back to my early point on how important data is, it's sort of a core principle for making all of this stuff work. Next is the functional intelligence principle. So the quality of agentic decisions is only as good as the breadth and depth of functional application intelligence available to the agent. So for you to execute a task autonomously, the application needs to be able to go and execute those tasks. So E2Open has done a good job of sort of putting the platform together and connecting this from planning to execution to make sure that the tasks can be executed both within and outside of your organization. And then finally, the contextual intelligence principle. So agents with deep domain and industry knowledge will consistently outperform those with less contextual understanding. So having that built-in rich functional capability within the applications and the industry knowledge will again enable the agents to go and execute these tasks. So we kind of took these principles and said, okay, let's keep this in mind as we move forward, as we start building things. And really our approach, we compare this, it's like an ASIC versus a CPU. So the embedded strategy versus the overlay strategy. So we are embedding the functional agents, the 3 types of functional agents within the applications themselves. We're not doing AI as sort of an overlay, pull the data out, do something with it, get information from it. My purview is that the overlay strategy will be valuable at first and probably would fall within that quick win category, but long-term will inherently be limited into just an analysis tool, where embedded AI within the applications will allow for autonomous functions within the supply chain. I had to Google what an ASIC was. I wasn't totally sure. So it's an application-specific integrated circuit versus a CPU, which is like a general purpose computing thing. So you can tell this is a R&D product manager put this one together. And then finally, okay, how do we get to the point where the majority of these actions are autonomous? Well, we won't be able to do it with just our R&D team building agents and pushing them out there because they have to be purpose-built for the tasks that apply to your organization. So what we're really doing is thinking about AI, and our vision for AI is as a platform as a service. So there's 3 main components of this, but basically there'll be a set of AI libraries where your team has access to, where they can take and then modify those libraries to go and then execute these actions. The next one is the agent builder. So, okay, I recognize this task that I do all the time. I don't think I need to do it. I think I can teach the computer to do it. You can do that within the platform, within the solution, to then go and take these inputs, transform them, here's the outputs. And then finally, sort of like the key thing. The third one is really bringing your own AI. So if you have this IP intensive specific thing that you're doing, you don't want to have to pull data out into your own network and then push it back into the supply chain platform. You can do it and kind of bring your own AI, manage it yourself, maintain your IP on that AI, have it all work together. And again, as Daniel mentioned, we've been doing this for almost 20 years in supply chain. So we have what I would say is better than average AI coverage today. We're investing heavily and technology is changing rapidly, but we have the sort of experience and know-how on how to apply this kind of technology to the way that people work. And I'll go over some examples in the next slide about what exactly that we're doing. But I think it's important to think about that, okay, this is new, this is emerging. Really, no vendors today have full coverage across the board, across all these different functions. But AI within E2Open is ahead of most. So we have very strong coverage in a lot of areas. And again, we're building up this capability extremely quickly. And this is my last slide, then we'll switch to questions. But we basically broke this down into, okay, as you walk out of here, let me make sure you understand some specifics about what we're doing within AI. So I do this in terms of highlights and examples. So the 4 gray boxes here are really kind of foundational capabilities. So I mentioned the agent builder. So being able to then, platform-wise, build agents to interact with the data and the applications that are within the platform. We have the digital assistant. It's really like an agent of agents. So as we get to the point where we want to execute more complex multi-step actions, really what the digital assistant is doing is using the pre-built agents and coordinating the execution of those tasks to do more complex things within supply chain context. Data-wise, data is very important. We're using Snowflake as sort of the data platform, so be able to move and transform data across the platform and also in and out of the platform as needed. And then finally, the model context protocol. So making sure that you're getting the answers correctly out of AI, the context needs to be known. So building this within the kind of framework that we have for MCP is all part of like the platform deliverables that we have. On the colored side here, this lines up with kind of how we group our supply chain applications within the platform. So the things that we're doing today with AI across these different areas, so on global trade, for example, we're doing automated HS classification. So you have your item master, you want to assign the HS code and make sure this is up to date all the time. We're using AI to do that mapping, taking the item description, country of origin, all these different things, and make sure the right HS code is assigned to it. On the planning side, one example would be supply sensing. So what is happening with inbound supply? When will it actually show up? Well, we're gathering information from suppliers or from logistics carriers, but we also want to use AI to predict when it's going to show up so that we can increase things like supply assurance and on-time delivery. So predicting inbound supply, not just predicting the demand side of the house, is sort of newer emerging technology within supply chain. On the supply side, so this is like the collaboration platform, we're learning from how people are interacting with exceptions. So certain exceptions get addressed right away in a certain way. Other exceptions are ignored all the time. rules-wise, they have the same level of criticality, but they're not being addressed the same way. So we make sure that we're learning from how people are interacting with the system and then applying the right level of criticality based on what people have done in the past. On the channel side, similar to global trade, we're doing item mapping. So this is making sure that the information you're getting from retailers maps to your item master so that we're sort of pulling all that data into demand signal management, make sure that everything sort of hooks together, and using AI to generate that mapping. And then on the logistics side, so being able to predict lead times and also rates based on what has happened recently so that when you're going and getting quotes from carriers, you kind of know what to expect versus just being at the whim of what numbers are coming back from particular suppliers. So this is a good way to anticipate logistics costs and negotiate better costs. And with that, I'll open it up to any questions. And if not, thank you very much for taking the time today. Again.
I think yesterday we heard from L'Oreal that 75% of projects related to AI stay on pilot and they never move to full deployment. So I was just wondering if you have any point of view as of, is that going to improve? What will it take for projects to actually succeed? If you have, I would like to hear your perspective on that.
Yeah, again, I've been sort of solution consulting now for 10 years, and I firmly believe that you can't just kind of grab technology and put it in place and hope it does something for you. It has to be, okay, here's a problem that we have, and that we have to go and fix this problem with the technology, and making sure that everyone on the project is aligned on, here's the problem that we're solving. I've started projects and then walked away from projects and come back later and seen what had developed in between and say, okay, we didn't set out to solve this problem. And it's kind of like, well, we saw what the technology could do, so we figured we would fit this stuff in first or along with it. And really, things start to devolve, and that's where you run into problems. So you have to really focus and streamline the team that's putting that technology in place and making sure there's a problem statement and sort of a value goal on the other side on here's what we're going to deliver organizationally, and keep everybody that's involved focused on those things. Thank you. One more question in the back here. Or not? No. Okay, let's go ahead and wrap up. Yep. Yeah, please.
5 years from now, when you're on the stage, what is supply chain enabled by AI? How would you characterize it?
Okay, so the question was, in 5 years, when I come back up here, what does it look like? What does supply chain look like that's empowered by this technology? I think if you went back and you sat with average supply chain man or woman in your organization today and said, okay, show me what you're doing. They're spending a lot of time moving stuff around, grabbing data places, doing analysis, answering questions. We spent a lot of time at Nestle this past summer, and we said, okay, you have these problems. How many of these you're actually addressing over the course of your day or your week? We said, okay, we have hundreds of problems. Okay, how many do you address? 10 or 15? Where it's like, okay, you probably work on the most important things and then nothing else gets addressed. Where if we can automate a lot of the simple stuff at the bottom of that list, then really what people are working on is letting the systems do a lot of that work that's taking up time and solve more of those problems. So I think the supply chain jobs in the future are really based on handling complex situations, relationship building, across supply chain partners, and less on, okay, let me stare at my computer and execute tasks that need to be executed.